Is buying a home really the best investment you can make? It is certainly one of the largest. And today I'm going to be shattering misconceptions about renting or buying a home. I'm Terrell Higgins, a real estate and personal finance nerd, and I'm going to be arming you with the knowledge you need to make a sound financial decision for you and your family. Let's get into it. There's an emotional and personal component to every financial decision that you make. And to ignore that fact is to be very naive. Home ownership can evoke a lot of emotions for people. The security that you lock in for your family by owning a home can be very reassuring, and owning a home has routinely been considered part of the American dream. When you buy a house, you've locked in a fixed cost for the next 30 years. Where if you're renting, you're at the whims of the property manager. He could hike prices every year, or he could kick you out of his home just because they intend to sell it. Owning that home gives you certainty about where you're going to live and how much it's going to cost. The only real variable cost in home ownership on a month-to-month basis is your insurance and the taxes. So over time, the insurance and taxes will go up. And even after you've completely paid off the home, you will still have to keep paying insurance and taxes, but that's still much cheaper than paying rent.
Boutique eye cream, unisex cologne, lip exfoliator, chocolate-covered almonds, and a Sudoku book. Just amenities everywhere.
I love amenities.
I know!
Amenities is a department where rentals actually have the advantage. You can get a pool, 24-hour security, gyms, and access to large gathering spaces for families and friends that would be very expensive to have at your home. That upfront cost to install a pool can be between $30,000 and $100,000. Not to mention, on an annual basis, you're going to have to spend between $3,000 and $5,000 just to maintain the pool. Between the chemicals and the electric costs, it's a lot. Where if you are renting, it's just an extra feature and there's no additional costs incurred. One thing that people don't talk about is how complicated your life becomes after you own a home. There are a lot of maintenance costs that you incur on a routine basis, and a lot of first-time homeowners don't account for those costs when they're buying a home. It is not uncommon for maintenance costs to be 1% to up to 4% of the purchase price of your home. If you have an older home, you can expect to spend more in maintenance costs. And if you aren't accounting for this, if you aren't anticipating this, it can be devastating to your finances. And the other thing is the time commitment. Not everybody wants to change the filters in their HVAC system, or mow the lawn, or treat their pool, or all the various tasks that come with home ownership. And if you aren't ready to allocate that time to those tasks, it can be overwhelming. So people are not perfect. So not everyone is planning and saving for the future the way they should be. So if you own a home, it is a forced savings plan. You have to keep paying your mortgage every month to stay there. And that forced savings plan is very beneficial to a lot of people. People's biggest nest egg, their biggest asset that they have, is their primary residence. And if you're one of many people who struggle to save, owning a home can give you the structure that you need to actually start putting away money and making headway in your personal finances. So even if renting is cheaper than owning a home, if you can't actually trust yourself to save that additional money each month, renting may still be a suboptimal decision for you and your family. When you own a home, you're actually giving up some of your flexibility. If you don't know if you want to stay in an area over the long term, it may be a better option to just rent. Because once you buy into the house, you're kind of stuck with the home for 5 to 7 years just because of the transaction costs associated with the initial purchase of a home. It's going to take about 5 to 7 years for you to build up enough equity in the house to offset those initial costs of purchasing the home. So if you can't commit to an area for the next 5 to 7 years, you shouldn't even consider buying a house because you're not even going to break even on that investment. So even if you have the equity built up in your home, homes are not a liquid investment. They actually take time to sell. You need to find a buyer on the other side. And that time on market has been going up in this high interest rate environment. So on average, you could expect for it to take between 60 and 90 days start to finish for you to find a buyer for your home. And you can look on Zillow to see what the average time on market is for your particular zip code. And if you reach out to a realtor, they should be familiar with what the average time on market will be. And if the market is hot, that time will be shorter. And if the market has cooled off like it has now, you can expect a longer timeline. So when you're buying a house, you really need to look ahead and think about the lifestyle that you're going to want over the next 5 to 7 years. If the home is large enough to support you and your family, if the school system is the quality and caliber that you're looking for your children, if the amenities and features of the community that the home is in line up with what you want, because the last thing you want to do is buy a house and immediately have buyer's regret and wish you bought in some other part of your town or city. So one of the biggest reasons people regret buying a home is because it makes them house poor. They've actually purchased a house that doesn't fit in their monthly budget. And that is a terrible place to be. I've seen it play out time and time again with family and friends. They're struggling to make the payments and they're always on the verge of losing their home. You don't want that to happen to you. So you really want to adhere to the 50-30-20 budget rule. So 50% are your required costs each month. So this is your housing, utilities, food. That 30% is what you want to do, all your fun activities, and the 20% is investing. And of that 50%, you really don't want your housing to be more than 28% of that. And ideally, you want it to be 25% or less of your 50% mandatory budget each month. If you adhere to keeping your housing costs less than 28% of your take-home money each month, it should put you in a very strong financial position where you're not going to regret owning your home and it's not going to make you house poor. Getting your home foreclosed on can be a huge financial setback. So generally, when you get into foreclosure proceedings, you're between 5 months and a year behind on your mortgage. It can be very difficult to repair your credit to obtain another house. Where if you are getting evicted from an apartment or a rental home, you're only about 1 to 2 months behind on your rent payments. So it's not as big of a hit to your credit as full-on foreclosure proceedings.
Show me the money! That's it, brother, but you got to yell that shit! Show me the money! I need to feel you, Jerry! Show me the money! Jerry, you better yell! Show me the money! Show me the money!
So let's dig into the numbers a bit more about renting versus buying. So one metric that real estate investors will use to analyze real estate markets is the price to rent ratio. So the price to rent ratio is just the median home value divided by the median rent price. So if you were going to analyze the price to rent ratio for a house you're going to buy, you would think about how much that house would cost if you were to purchase it, and then divide that by the rent times 12. So that annual rental amount. And if that price to rent ratio is less than 15, that means that it is very favorable to buy in that market. You'd be in a better position to purchase a home in a market when you're less than 15 than if it is greater than 15. So from 15 to about 20, it is more favorable to rent. And if it's greater than 20, it is very, very favorable to rent in that market. So some examples of markets where it is very, very favorable to rent would be Hawaii or New York. Their price to rent ratios are well above 20. And as an investor, you would think you would want to buy in the markets that have low price to rent ratios, but it's actually the exact opposite. You want to buy in those markets that it is more favorable to rent than to buy. And the reason is you're going to have more favorable tenants. The pool of people who are renting will encompass more of the higher end of the income spectrum. If you're in one of those cheaper locations in the country, the very wealthy people are all going to own a house. Where if you're in an area of the country where the price to rent ratio is very high, all walks of life are going to be renting, and you're going to have a very good tenant pool to draw from and very strong demand for your rental property. Another way to compare the finances of renting versus buying is to look at the unrecoverable cost of renting versus buying. I can't take credit for this unrecoverable cost method for analyzing a property. I actually saw it on another YouTuber's channel by the name of Humphrey Yang, and I'll leave a link down below to his video if you want to try this method. So if you are renting a home, those unrecoverable costs are simple. It's just the rent that you're paying each month times 12. Those are the costs that you cannot recover. Sure, if you're renting, there's a few services that will allow you to claim your rent to help improve your credit. And there's actually a few services that will allow you to get reward points for the rent that you're paying each month. But overall, it's an unrecoverable cost that gives you very little value. Essentially, it's more complicated for a home. You're going to have to account for the interest costs, the taxes, the maintenance costs on the home, the opportunity costs for investing in a home versus investing in the stock market. And if you take all these factors into account, he comes up with a very useful thumb rule. It's the 8.71% thumb rule. So if you take the property value of your home and you take 8.71% of that property value, that's a good estimate for what the unrecoverable costs are for your home. And you can go to his channel and check out the worksheet if you want to work through what your exact number will be. But I will tell you that it's going to be pretty close to 8.71%. Could be a little higher, it could be a little lower depending on a variety of factors, what current interest rates are, what level of down payment you're going to put on the home, and what your assumptions are for how much money you could actually make in the market. But overall, that 8.71 thumb rule should tell you what the unrecoverable costs are for the home. So if you compare the unrecoverable cost, that 8.71% thumb rule of the home, to the rent cost, that rent times 12, you can see which one is lower, and that should direct you to which one would be a better investment. So let's do a little example. So in California, an average 2-bedroom home costs you $3,552 a month. So that is $42,624 a year. And if you were attempting to get an equivalent house, it would run you about $700,000. So applying that 8.71% thumb rule, that is $60,970, which you can see is quite a bit more than the rent price. But it is possible to get a similar home for about $500,000. And if you apply the 8.71% rule there, that's about $43,550, which you can see is a lot closer to the unrecoverable cost of renting. But the biggest reason I dislike this thumb rule is because it ignores a couple factors. So the tax benefits of owning a home. So if you itemize your taxes, you can actually deduct mortgage interest, the taxes, and the insurance from your taxes. And one of the biggest tax benefits to owning a home is that if you're single and you sell a home, the first $250,000 of equity in the home you can get completely tax-free. And if you're married, that number jumps to $500,000.
More money, more money, more money.
That's a huge tax benefit. So as your home starts to appreciate, that money, when you leave the home, you can put in your pocket and not pay any taxes on. And that's something that this rule does not account for. But the other thing that this rule doesn't account for is the fact that owning a home is a leveraged investment. So if you invested $100,000 into the stock market, specifically like an S&P 500 index fund, you could expect your annual returns to be around 11%. And 11% of $100,000 is $11,000, which is a good return. But if you were to put that $100,000 down as a 20% down payment on a home, you can buy a $500,000 home. If you look at the house price index year over year from 1992 through to 2024, you can actually expect to make about a 4.62% annual return year over year on your home. So if you make 4.62% on a $500,000 house, that is $23,100. That is more than double that 11% return that you would have gotten in the stock market. And it's all because of the leverage that you have in the property. And there are outlier periods in the US housing price index that people tend to ignore. So in 2021, US home prices went up 19%. So if we are out earning the stock market at 4.62%, we are absolutely destroying the stock market at a 19% return. And this large jump in housing prices in 2021 is one of the main reasons I became a millionaire in my mid-30s. We had a lot of homes, we had a lot of investment properties, and that large jump in the housing price index caused us to come into a large amount of wealth. Everyone focuses in on 2008, but home values have these brief periods where they compound at extreme rates. So if you look from 1943 to 1947, home prices compounded 118%. And from 1974 to 1979, home prices compounded 93%. There's actually this crazy statistic that people who own homes, their net worth is actually 40 times more than the net worth of people who rent. And it's all because of the leverage and the compounding over time.
Damn!
Hopefully I've armed you with the knowledge that you need to make a sound financial decision for you and your family about renting versus buying. And if you're still on the fence about buying a home in this high interest rate environment, check out my video on how you can actually get low interest rates all the way down to 2% in the current market. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys next time.